Okay, so we'll start seated today for yin. Um, Come to a comfortable seat. I'm going to turn to face you just so you can see me, but you can face whatever direction's working for you so you can see the screen. We're going to start with the feet. So you'll come to a cross-legged seat. Um, the foot that's in front of you, that's the foot we're going to work with first. So you're going to take the opposite hand, take your index finger, put it between the big toe and the second toe, and then from there, weave all the fingers between the toes. So we've done this before, but it's been a while. I don't think we've done it in this class lately. You're trying to wiggle those fingers all the way down to the base of the toes, but some of us have really tight feet. Some of us can also get this foot up pretty easily onto the leg. That's an option. Skip it if it's not a good one. And then as you grab onto the top of the foot, fingers are on the top of the foot, heel of the hand on the sole of the foot. Start to move the top of the foot forward and back. So see how I'm moving my elbow? Try doing it that way. So you're using the whole arm to get some movement in the foot. And don't worry if you can't get a finger between each toe. We all have uh, different things that we're working with our body. And if you never do this, it isn't the easiest thing because most of us are used to having our toes tightly squeezed together all day long in shoes. And now we're just trying to make some space here. So you want to build some heat in the foot. And then stop the movement, see if you can get the fingers down a little bit lower and then spread the fingers as wide as you can. And now you're really spreading the toes. So spread the fingers as wide as you can, which is spreading the toes. The lower you get with the fingers on the base of the toes, the wider you can spread them. And you'll come back to what we were just doing. So grab onto the top of the foot. Maybe you can get the fingers down a little bit lower and start to move that elbow forward and back. Okay, wiggle the fingers down a little bit lower, spread the toes out wide. This is the last time we're doing this. And now the foot's a little bit more warm. You've had the fingers between the toes for a little while, so you might be able to do it a little bit more. And then you'll start to take the fingers out from between the toes, release the hand, then extend the legs out in front of you. It's always nice to look at the difference between the feet. There might be a difference in the color of the skin. The toes are certainly spread wider on the foot you just worked on versus the foot you haven't touched. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So cross the legs the other way. Take the index finger on the opposite hand and you want to bring that between the big toe and the second toe and then start weaving the fingers between the toes. If you have rings on, it's just like a bigger toe spreader. If it's painful, take your jewelry off. And then maybe the foot comes up. It doesn't have to. You could prop it up on a block or a pillow, whatever you have, if you want the foot to be up higher. And then start with that movement, keeping this opening dynamic. Giving yourself plenty of time, the foot plenty of time to start receiving what we're giving it. Just a lot of focused attention. Our feet are doing so much work all day long. They need this kind of recovery. And then wiggle the fingers all the way down. Spread the fingers once you get them as low as they'll go. Widen the space between each toe as best you can. And your feet might be really tight. That's fine. Just work with what you have. Okay. Grab onto the top of the foot. Let's move that elbow forward and back again. And we'll come back to wiggling the fingers down a little bit lower, spreading the hands as wide as we can, as much as the toes and feet will allow. And start to release. Hand comes away from the foot, hands back behind you. Stretch the feet out in front of you and then spread the toes. See if you can get space between each toe. There might be some toes that just want to stay together. That definitely happens. And then you can start to let the feet relax. Come forward to hands and knees. So as you come forward to tabletop, bring the knees all the way together, the feet all the way together. So inner edges of the feet are touching. Toes are tucked underneath you. And then start to walk the hands back. So you're coming into a toe squat. We've already done a lot of work on the feet, so we're adding on to it. So you could keep the hands down the mat. You could walk the hands up to the thighs. If you can sit all the way up onto the heels, make sure the fourth and fifth toe are pointing straight forward. You might need to manually adjust them because sometimes they won't go any other way. Then as you come here, lift the arms up, only if they're available. If they're down on the mat, leave them there. It's fine. You can skip this part. I'm just trying to keep you distracted more than anything else. Bend that right elbow, reaching down the center of the back, and grab onto the right elbow. Lift the chest, starting to get into the right shoulder, upper body, trying to keep the gaze forward. Lowest front ribs hug in a little bit, and that creates more length in the spine, especially if they were popping out. And sometimes we want to puff out the chest when we do these types of things. We want some space there, but the lowest front ribs in. Switch sides, reach the arms up, bend the left elbow, grab onto the left elbow. Keep the gaze going forward. That helps you keep the arms up and the chest up. Smooth breaths in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat. And release the arms. Bring the hands back down in front of you. Untuck the toes back to tabletop. And you can start to tap the feet on the mat. It's getting that blood flow back. So we'll come back onto the knees again, but this time let's bring the knees all the way together, feet slightly apart. We're going to bring the hips back between the feet for saddle pose. You could take a block or two between the ankles, especially if you can't get the hips all the way down evenly. So I like putting a block on the lowest height. You might want to put a block on the medium height, or you could stack 2 blocks on the lowest height. That's a good one too. Before you come back, make sure you have a strap nearby. Take the hands, move the calf muscle out of the way, sit the hips back onto the mat or block or whatever you're using. It could be a blanket or a pillow too. That's kind of a nice way if you're really close to getting down and the block's too much height. So tops of the feet are pressing down, outer ankles are hugging in, knees are together as best we can, and the inner thighs are going down toward the mat. Take your strap, unroll it, and then and it doesn't have to be a strap. It could just be anything that has some length to it, any kind of material. So you want to hold it in the middle just so you have plenty of length to work with. In the right hand, reach the right arm all the way up overhead, bend the right elbow, hanging the strap down the center of the back, and then bring the left arm out to the side, thumb side down. Left arm comes behind the back, and then crawl that left hand up the spine. Once you can't go any further, grab onto the strap, lift the chest, press down into the sit bones, rise up through the crown of the head. So coming back into another shoulder opening, but also giving the feet a break. So we had them tucked before. Now you have them going straight back. Still getting into the lower body joints. And this is also a hip opening, an internal hip rotation. Listen to the sound of your breath. Trying to make those inhales and exhales way longer than they normally are. Creating a soothing sound. One that calms you. Keep the strap in the left hand, the bottom hand, just release the arms down by the sides. Feel the difference in one shoulder versus the other. Maybe the right shoulder feels higher than the left shoulder. We'll even things out. So you'll take the strap in the left hand, reach the left arm up overhead, hang the strap between the shoulder blades. Right arm comes out to the side, thumb side down. Bring that right arm behind the back. Reach up between the shoulder blades, start to wiggle that right hand up. When it won't go any further, grab the strap, elbows in toward the body, sit up tall. And it's yin, so you're not trying to go for the deepest shoulder opening. You definitely want to feel something happening in the upper body, but not so much that you're counting down for this to all be over. Take one more inhale in through the nose. On the exhale, release the arms down by the sides. You can set the strap off to the side. You'll come forward to hands and knees. If you have anything underneath the hips, set that off to the side. Come to seated with the legs out in front of you. So the legs have been bent pretty much this entire practice. Now we'll keep them straight. You could use a strap around the soles of the feet. We're just going to come into a seated forward fold. Use whatever props you want. Blocks could go underneath the hands or the hips. Reach the arms all the way up on your inhale. Lift up with the upper body and lower the lower body. So you get the spine as long as you possibly can. Keep this length, start to hinge forward, go slow, toes are pointing up, and then bring the hands to rest on something. So it could be the feet, it could be the mat, it could be the legs, blocks, whatever you have. And if you're using a strap, you can loop a strap around the soles of the feet, close the eyes, start to let the head and the neck go. Once you get the chest as far forward as it's going to go. So in yin, we call this pose caterpillar. If there's any tenderness in the lower back area, bend the knees, bring the chest to rest on the thighs, and you can clasp opposite elbows. If your back feels fine, keep the legs straight. And maybe you're starting to feel a little bit more length in the back side of the body as it becomes more open, more accepting of the pose. And you'll start to bring yourself back up to seated. Take your time as you come back up. Have a block nearby. Just set it off to the hips. Set it off to the side of the hips. Bring the soles of the feet to the mat. Scoot yourself forward a little bit so when you lie down, you still have something underneath you. If you're practicing with the mat, no big deal if you're not. So soles of the feet on the mat, we're coming into supported bridge. So press into the feet, lift the hips up, take the block on the lowest height underneath the hips. Let the hips rest, maybe lift the chest up, arms down by the sides. And we'll just start here. So you can either look up and find one spot straight up in front of you to focus on, or you can close the eyes. Either way, not moving the eyes if you can. And lift one leg up. It can be relaxed, but you just want to make sure you feel even on the block or whatever you have underneath the hips. If you feel pretty good, lift the other leg up. Legs are still relaxed. We're just reversing the blood flow in the legs and the feet. So the feet have had plenty of attention. Now we're just trying to drain them a little bit. Same thing with the legs. Still in our back bend, so chest is still lifting and spreading. And start to bend the knees, bring the feet back down to the mat, coming back to your supported bridge. Press into the feet, lift the hips up. If you have a block, bring it to the medium height, set the hips back down. So just lifting the supported bridge a little bit higher now that we have the feet back down. Chest can lift up a little bit more if that's comfortable. So the shoulders are pressing down into the ground, outer upper arms are pressing down into the ground. And press into the feet, lift the hips up, lower the block, come back down to the lowest height if you took it up one level. And then this time you can stretch the feet out in front of you, lengthening the legs. Heels just rest down on the mat. Keep the chest lifted. You can let the legs relax. Still in a back bend, but adding a hip opening here. So you might feel some length on the top of the hips, pelvis area, maybe the hip flexor area. Front side of the body, feeling a nice opening. Now that we've explored this shape for some time, just changing the variations. And we'll start to walk the feet back in, soles of the feet to the mat. Press into the feet, lift the hips up, slide the block out from underneath you. Hips are down on the ground again. And just lying here for a moment, taking in the sensations of the back. You're in that back bend for several minutes. Hug the right knee in toward the chest. Switching sides, right foot comes down, left knee comes in. Set the left foot down, roll over to your right side. Use the hands to bring yourself up to seated. And you're coming back to hands and knees. If you have blocks, I would use them. If you don't, it's not a big deal. Just come to hands and knees with the hands on the mat. If you have blocks, take each block on the tallest height out in front of you. Bring the hands up onto the blocks. You want the blocks to be ahead of the shoulders. So it's like you're reaching forward. And all this does is it makes it a lot easier to step the right foot forward. And we're trying to keep things a little easier and smoother in our yin practice. So back toes could be tucked or untucked, whichever way the foot's more comfortable. If you have your hands on blocks, great. Walk the hands back, lifting the chest up a little higher. And then maybe you bring the fingertips up onto the blocks. Chest is still lifted. And then we can all do this next one, whether or not we have props. Hands come up to this front thigh. You just kind of push the thigh forward, keep the chest lifted. Feeling a nice opening on the top of the left hip. And then notice where the pelvis is, the hips are. So you want to feel like the tailbone and the pubic bone are going toward one another. So you're not sticking the tailbone back behind you. Take the heel of the right hand to the sacrum. You can help the tailbone and the pubic bone to go toward one another. Flip that left palm up, reaching it forward. Reach the left arm up. So it's a back bend. You're still in this low lunge. You have the support of the right heel of the hand. You're just trying to create some length on the left side of the body, getting a nice opening on the whole front side on the left. Gaze comes forward, hands come back down to the blocks if you're using them. Start to walk the blocks forward and bring that right knee back underneath you. So back on the tabletop, hands up ahead of you, switch sides. Left foot comes forward. Find that runner's lunge, back knee down, top of the foot can rest. Can sink the hips a little bit. Start to walk the hands back. Blocks, if you're using them, hang on to those. So you can find that lift of the chest. Maybe you come up onto the fingertips, get yourself comfortable here. Now you know where we're headed on this second side. Hands up onto this front thigh. You can push the thigh away from you, keep the chest lifted. Start to feel that opening at the top of the right hip. Left heel of the hand to the sacrum, right palm faces up, tailbone and pubic bone going toward one another. Lift that right arm up. Feel the length on the right side of the body. Gaze comes back forward. Slowly bring the hands to the blocks. Walk the hands and the blocks forward. Bring that left knee underneath you. Set the blocks off to the side. If you're on a firm surface, a hardwood floor, and you're using a mat, bring the mat back. So you're just folding it, doubling up the mat, and then bring the knees up on top of that extra padding. If you've got enough padding underneath you, you can skip this part. Tuck the toes. Knees are hip width distance apart. And take your blocks, just bring them off to the sides of the mat, tallest height, just off to the sides, and then come up to standing on the knees. So we won't use the blocks right away, but they're just there if we want to use them later on. So we've been setting up for camel pose, Ustrasana. So take the hands to the lower back, fingertips can point down. You could point them up toward the shoulders. That's a deeper opening on the wrist and the forearm. So see if that's something that feels good for you today. If not, skip it. Lift the inner thighs up, lift the belly up, start to lift the chest, keep the hips over the knees. And then maybe you stay with the gaze going forward and the chest leaning back, or you could look up, but you'll feel the difference where you put the eyes, how it intensifies the pose. Lower back is long, even here, pubic bone and tailbone going toward one another. Looking forward, slowly bring yourself back up, standing on the knees, untuck the toes, sit back onto the heels. You can rest the hands on the thighs, close the eyes, and just take in the energy that brought into the body. It's a big pose, probably the biggest pose in yin. Take some prep. Shoulders have to be open. Front side of the body has to be open. All right, let's come back into it. So come back up onto the knees, tuck the toes. Here's where you can use the blocks. You can take the blocks on the tallest height. You want to bring them right outside the calf, so ahead of the feet, by the ankles, tallest height, right outside. Bring the hands to the lower back. Lift the inner thighs, lift the belly, the chest lifts and goes back. And then once you find your camel, find your gaze. So up or forward, that always gives you more length in the back side of the neck. Leave the hands where they are, or maybe you bring the hands to the blocks. It's not that much further down, so could be something to try. Chest still lifts, shoulders away from the ears. Maybe you feel like this is a good place to be. The other option is bringing the hands to the heels, toes are tucked. That's only a little bit lower than the blocks. Slowly bring the hands back to the lower back, coming back out the way we came in. Untuck the toes, sit back onto the heels, rest, hands to the thighs, or you could bring the hands to the heart. That's kind of a nice place to be. You can feel the heartbeat. Be grateful for all that it does for you, both physically and emotionally. And we'll do one last camel and then we'll be done with our back bends. So if you like the blocks, you can continue using them. Come back up onto the knees, bring the blocks to whatever height seems to make the most sense for you. You can always go lower with the, skip going lower with the blocks. It's basically the same height as the legs if you tuck the toes. If you want to go the deepest variation, tops of the feet rest down on the mat. And then you have to reach even further back for the heels. So hands to the lower back, lift the inner thighs, lift the belly, lift the chest, lean back, outer elbows in. See how this feels. Stay here, or maybe hands to the blocks. You can always take it in stages and just layer on as you'd like. If you feel like the heels are there, you could take the heels with the fingers, still lifting and spreading the chest, feeling that stretch in the whole front side of the body. Back side of the body's working hard. And slowly bring the hands back up to the lower back. Sit back onto the heels, hands to the thighs. Close the eyes, rest. Or hands to the heart, wherever you want to put them. Blink open the eyes. Come back to hands and knees. If you have the mat folded, unroll it, bring it out in front of you. Come to seated. You won't need the blocks, so you can set those off to the side. You will probably want a bolster or a blanket. Either one will do. I'm going to grab a bolster. My bolster is way lighter than my folded blanket. Bring that off to the side. Come on down onto your back. And let's cross the ankles, bring the knees up, grab onto the knees. So feet are hooked, one foot on top of the other, and then you can just rock side to side here. And this is a nice counter for the back bend before we start to move the spine in a different shape. Switch the hooking of the feet, other foot on top. Same thing. You're trying to spread those knees as wide as you can. You won't be able to go that far with the way the feet are. Rocking, if that feels good, that's an option. Set the feet back down onto the mat. So I have my bolster on the left side. If you're going to use it, that's where you want it. Press into the feet, scoot the hips over to the right, knees to the left. Take the bolster between the knees, calves, and feet. So you have some padding between the legs that also gives you space on the lower back. Try to get this right hip stacked all the way on top of the left hip. Then reach back with the right arm. See if you can get the right shoulder down onto the mat. Gaze can go over the right arm. And now you're in your reclined spinal twists. Once you have the chest going away from the knees, you can close the eyes and just be here without a whole lot of effort. You can start to feel how the twist is releasing the back bend. Exploring all the different ways we can move our spine safely, responsibly. You'll start to bring the gaze back up toward the sky. If you're using the bolster, set it off to the side. Bring the feet to the mat, find center on your back. Knees come in toward the chest. Keep the knees and the feet together. Just find some slow circles of the knees. Go the opposite way. Set the feet back down onto the mat. Bolster comes over to the right side if you're using it. And move the knees over to the right. Place the bolster between the knees, shins, and feet. Left arm reaches out to the left. Find your spinal twist here. Maybe the gaze goes over the left arm. Right hand can just rest on the body somewhere that's comfortable. Once you're in it, just stay there. We'll do the same exact amount of time we did on the first side. And start to roll the head back to center. Set the bolster off to the side. Come back to your back. Bring the knees in toward the chest. Move the knees around in a circle. Maybe starting in the other direction, the way you don't normally go first. Switch side or switch directions, go the other way. Set the feet back down onto the mat. Roll over to your, actually, let's stay on our backs. Stay on your back. Use the bolster. So take the bolster the wide way underneath the knees. So you have the legs bent. You want to move it kind of as far away from you as you can. You don't want it too close to the hip. So if it's not touching the hips, great. If it is, you can move it later. So bring the soles of the feet together on the mat and the knees wide. So reclined butterfly. So you can stay right here. Knees are supported with the bolster. If you want something deeper, same shape, but the feet come up onto the bolster. And that's where you'll feel if the bolster needs to move farther away from you or come in closer. So if you need to move it farther away from you, take the time to do that. It really does make a big difference. Arms come down by the sides, palms face up, or hands could go on top of the body. Close the eyes. Be here. And if the feet are up onto the bolster, just move them forward so they're on the mat, still staying in the same shape so you can feel the difference between the feet elevated and the feet down on the mat. Then extend the legs out in front of you. Knees will be lifted with the bolster still. Toes can turn out. Legs are just long out in front of you, totally relaxed. Bring the knees in toward the chest. Roll over to your right side. use the hands to bring yourself up to seated. So set the bolster off to the side. Come forward to hands and knees. And once you come forward to hands and knees, let's grab the blocks if you're using them, tallest height, but bring them over toward the left. So one block's in the center of the mat and one block's on the left side of the mat. So there's plenty of room on this right side. Blocks are out ahead of you. Right foot steps forward outside of the right hand. So now you're coming into a wide dragon. Top of the foot can rest if you want. You want to scoot that back knee back. You can stay here with the chest lifted, or you could start to play with the stacking of the blocks. Maybe you put one on top of the other and you bring the forearms down to the blocks. You can let the head and the neck go. Try to not round the upper back too much, meaning just minimize it. So it's okay if there's some rounding. If you have a ton of rounding, then the chest needs to come up a little higher, probably. We want to keep you in the hips for this one. And start to come back up onto the hands. If you came down onto the forearms, if you're using the blocks, bring the blocks up to the tallest height over toward the left. Shift the hips back, bring that right knee back underneath you. Walk the blocks over to the right this time, so you have plenty of room on the left side of the mat. Step the left foot forward outside of the left hand. Keep the chest lifted. See how this feels? Top of the foot can rest down. You want that right knee to be back. Stay here. This could be a different situation on this side, so you want to adjust for it. Maybe you stack the blocks. That's a little bit lower and bring the forearms down. You can always go lower or higher, so you need to figure out where you can sustain the pose. Be in it without much thought. Still being able to find a sense of surrender. So leaving room to drift further into the pose as the hips begin to open. Start to make your way back up, coming back up onto the hands, adjusting the blocks to the tallest height for an easier transition. Shift the hips back, bring that left knee underneath you. Setting the blocks down to the sides, come to seated. We'll start to set up for Shavasana. Let's use a bolster as a pillow the wide way back behind you. So you'll rest the head on that. Have the blocks nearby. Set those off to the sides of the mat near the hips. And then come down onto your back. Rest the head on the pillow. Make sure the curve of the neck is supported too. And then take the blocks on the lowest height if you have them. Bring them the wide way underneath the thighs, and you can separate the feet. So you want them wider than hip width distance apart, wide enough angle so it's still comfortable. You could certainly go too wide and be uncomfortable. Thighs are elevated with the blocks. Arms down by the sides, maybe lift the chest a little bit, set it back down, palms face up, and you start to let the fingers curl, the feet totally relax. And everything else. So letting go of any effort, anywhere you're holding yourself, even in the face. Start to find some movement in the hands and the feet. Walk the feet in, bending the knees, and set your blocks off to the side so they're out of the way. Roll over to your right side. You can keep the head on the pillow. Use the left hand. Bring yourself up to a comfortable seat. Sitting up tall, eyes closed so you stay inside. Bring the hands together in front of you. Keep the lift of the chest. Start to bow the head. Honor and acknowledge your heart and spirit, as well as everyone around you. Blink open the eyes. Namaste. Thank you. That was a pretty deep opening for the back, along with the hips, really full body. And then we did the footwork at the beginning too. So hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. I'll see you next time. Thank you.